Wake up, wake up. It is Wednesday, February the 12th. Happy birthday to my son, Ben. Love him to death. Let's go. Let's talk a little Niners. Let's get into it. Little Brock Purdy, little Debo Samuel, little Myles Garrett, a little, well, who knows? Let's go.
Hey, happy birthday, Benny. And wake up, wake up. Indeed, it's great to have you here. We're brought to you by Sam's Chowder House. Hit like and subscribe before you do anything else today. Thank you so very much for being here. Little midweek wake up, Larry. And I see that we have titled this show, the decisions around Brock. And basically, I feel like we're chasing our own tail with the same subject that should be put to bed. And the way that I see the playoffs unfolding this year, to me, means that the 49ers should continue their journey with Brock Purdy. I'm looking at hallmarks of stability, having their fingerprints all over these NFL playoffs. And I think Brock provides stability while being a very good quarterback, while being a quarterback that gets along with his head coach. I think they just had a rough year together. Rough years happen to good teams. Really good teams can show up prepared for huge moments and totally blow it. We just all saw that happen to Kansas City, and they got Patrick Mahomes trying to re-evaluate a guy based on every down he plays, every game he plays, every interception he throws. It's a little nuts. I believe in Brock Purdy. Would I prefer to not have to pay him $60 million to believe in him? Sure. I bet you every team feels that about their quarterback. But that's the price of doing business, and I would not be getting out of the Brock Purdy business if I'm the 49ers, not here, not now.
It's such an interesting time because we just saw the Eagles beat the Chiefs, and it was a unique Super Bowl in that both teams' leading rusher was their quarterback. How about that? Jalen Hurts led the Eagles, 11 carries for 72 yards, 6.5 yards a carry. He had a 17-yard run, but that was the big one. But he definitely ran effectively. And Patrick Mahomes, believe it or not, also averaged over 6 yards a carry. He ran 4 times for 25 yards. It was quite a bit more than what Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco did. And, it's funny. You go back and you look at you look at the playoffs. Okay, so the Super Bowl, both quarterbacks could move, all right? Then you go back to the conference championship game. Jaden Daniels and Jalen Hurts, both those guys can really move. Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, both those guys can really move. So when you got down to the final 2, both quarterbacks could move. When you got down to the final 4, both quarterbacks could move. Now let's push back one more week. The Texans have Stroud. He's not a great runner, but he can move a little bit. And they lost. The Lions have Goff. He couldn't move, and the Commanders kind of forced him to move. He turned the ball over a bunch, and they lost. And then Stafford doesn't move well. They lost, and then Lamar obviously moves very well. But I think my point overall is that mobility at the quarterback position, I think, especially when you watched the games that Brock didn't play for the Niners this year, man, I mean, it really is it's gone from, wow, that's a neat new wrinkle, to, man, that's really a value added deal, to it's a necessity. And that's how fast the whole thing is getting small. The whole NFL, when I say the whole thing is getting smaller and faster. Have you noticed that? Defensive ends who used to be 280, 275, these guys that are 230. Linebackers who used to be 250, 260 with the neck roll, now you see converted safeties and guys who are 220, 215. A lot of people say the Niners ought to sign Jamie Sherwood away from the Jets. He had a great year. He's 214 pounds. And then everybody's about faster.
Well, I think,
and you just with the athletes on D, I think you need to have an athlete on offense. So in some ways, I think it plays right into. It makes me feel better that the Niners have Brock Purdy after seeing the way these playoffs went.
Power is a requisite. There's no such thing as the guy who doesn't have a good bench press playing anywhere in football. Like, they're all strong. So now really the question is, how much speed can you put under that strength? And there is more value now placed on speed at positions that really weren't evaluated for their speed, O-line, D-line. And the world is different now. I mean, you got guys running 4.5 40s who are 6'4", 300 in this league. It's amazing the amount of athletes that are out there. And again, the requisite is everybody out here is strong. Now it's how much speed can you bring along with that strength? Now, to get back to your question about Purdy and the line, like, look at the Eagles. The Eagles just showed you what the best of both worlds can do. When you have a mobile quarterback and an offensive line that is basically like a build the wall level offensive line, that's when great things happen. That's when you can win a Super Bowl. When you got a mobile quarterback, somebody who can make plays around an offensive line that doesn't create the need of creating plays. You know, you just your quarterback gets to pick and choose when he wants to go to the other weapon, which is his legs. And that is a huge reason why the Eagles are world champions this week. So, you know, I think Brock Purdy, if you were to move off, for who, for what? I mean, that's a legitimate question. For who, for what? I don't know who that guy is. I don't want to replace Brock with a rookie just to have a rookie contract. You want to be a good football team this year. The 49ers got the third best odds to reach the Super Bowl in the NFC next year. You know, so if you think that the 49ers are in a rebuild, they're not. They're in a retool. There's a little bit of a difference there. And if you really want to say it's a rebuild, well, then you say goodbye to Brock, because you would be starting with someone new. I'm not interested in what Aaron Rodgers has left more than I'm interested in what you know, a guy like Brock Purdy has to offer. So I don't want to go backwards. I don't want to get older. I don't want a rookie being handed the reins. I don't think Kyle wants to hand a rookie with the reins. I just feel that this is a content creator black hole that has sucked up so much attention. We forgot to pay attention to other things. Brock isn't going anywhere. He's about to make $50 to $60 million. Everybody, if you don't like it, it's time to start rooting for another team, because that's what's about to happen.
Right. I mean, that's the reality. You know, we can deal with the what ifs and that kind of thing, but the reality is that the Niners love him and they're about to pay him. But I just think that the perception, you know, it's like we're so tied to how things happen that we don't, you know, Brock walked off the field twice last year as would have been a champion if the defense had gotten a stop, and they didn't get a stop, and he's not a champion, and there's no ambiguity about that. But at the same time, it's like all this focus on Brock, and maybe the focus even shouldn't be on, forget Brock, and maybe it shouldn't even be on the offense. Maybe it should be on the defense and special teams. And the reason I say that, there was an incredible article that I read yesterday, Damon, that the Niners offense last year, this last final year, in 2024, finished 9th overall in DVOA, right, which a lot of people think is an all-encompassing offensive stat. But it's interesting on a lot of fronts. Why? Well, one, the Niners finished offensively ahead of Philadelphia, ahead of the Rams, ahead of the Vikings, and almost dead even with Kansas City. And then when you look at the top 10 teams in DVOA, 7 of the top 8 ahead of the 49ers made the playoffs. And even CMC barely played. He played 3 games. J.P. Mason averaged 5 yards a carry. Guerrero averaged 5 yards a carry. The injuries, Ayuk missed 10 games on offense. Trent missed 7. Purdy, Kittle, Debo all missed games. Basically, their top 6 players on offense missed 36 combined games. And even without those players and having 6 key guys miss 36 games, the Niners offense ranked 4th overall in yards, 7th in yards per carry, 4th in net yards per pass attempt. And as I said, they had a better DVOA offensively than Philly, the Rams, the Vikings, and right there with the Chiefs. So I guess my point is just that maybe the offense isn't that bad. Maybe it's more about this defense is horrible.
I said
and
that
the
all
special
year.
teams is horrible. And maybe the addition of Robert Saleh with some new faces on defense. Maybe I'm not saying the Niners don't have offensive problems, because we definitely know that they have some offensive needs. But I would be pretty okay if they could solve, let's say, maybe a few of their offensive problems in free agency and devote this entire draft almost across the board, maybe with an exception here or there, to defense. And if you do that, you bring Saleh in and do a whole draft on defense, who knows? Maybe they're good to go next year.
Well, I need some offensive linemen, and that is non-negotiable. We are improving this offensive line, or we're wasting our time. I mean, that is a huge concern for me. And that's,
but maybe you do it in free agency. I mean, I love the offensive line too, and there's 3 or 4 offensive linemen in this draft that I absolutely would target and go after. And I think it's definitely a need, and I think tight end is a need, and I think
you got to go O-line early, Larry, just because there's so much defensive depth, especially across the defensive line. I want to go.
I want to go best player. I want to go. I just want to go with a great player. I think the 49ers have gotten themselves in this problem because they go into the draft looking for a particular position. You know, that you draft Ricky Pearsall 32nd in front of guys like Zach Frazier and others who are better, in my opinion. Why? Because you're looking for a wide receiver. And then when your scope is that narrow, then you're just looking at, well, is this wide receiver better than that wide receiver? And you ignore all these other positions. I think the best teams at drafting play the thing as it comes. And if there's just the one thing about Detroit just keeps drafting great players. And if you're going to, outrun the best teams in the league, I don't think you can cherry pick and be like, well, in this draft, we need, this and this and this. It's like, okay, generally you can have that, but overall, just draft great players. Even if there's a great tight end, like Tyler Warren is a great tight end. Okay, let's say the 49ers get into a position, I don't think at 11, but let's just say they move down. Let's say they move down 10 or 20 spots, and they're now bottom of the first round. And then Tyler Warren from Penn State just happens to be there. And you have George Kittle. I'd still draft Tyler Warren because I want greatness.
I don't mind that. I think that Warren also, he might be a little bit of what feels like the sprinkles on top of the sundae, but the frosting that George Kittle has left to spread around, it's going to get thinner and thinner and thinner as we go along here. George can't have 4 years left in his playing days. He just can't. Maybe I know a lot of people are talking about Travis Kelce maybe hanging it up. George still has a lot more left, I think, to give to football than Travis Kelce. But you got to have a plan B, and you need a second tight end who is a weapon. And I think that Kyle could do big things with him. I mean, how about this? As you just said, the 49ers offense is better than anybody thinks. It just had so much trouble in the red zone. The red zone troubles evaporate, I think, with another weapon who you're comfortable playing in the red zone, a tight end, a second tight end. I can only think of all the plays that Kyle can come up with if you got both those guys out there. And you got, the mismatches of safeties and linebackers covering these guys. So sure, if that presents itself, it's not the worst idea I've ever heard. I just think in this draft, again, I want to go back to Drew Dolman, who I told you about on Monday, who's the number one free agent target in my mind that the 49ers should go after. I'm going after Atlanta's center, and I'm going after him hard. I'm making a big play for him at the stroke of midnight at free agency if I'm the 49ers. I'm no draft Nick. I'm not trying to pretend that I see the draft in a way that I'm some draft expert, but I got hunches and I got inclinations. And just looking at this thing, I don't think you need to be a draft expert to know that there is a staggering amount of defensive line talent, which means I think you can hold off early and look offense early. I think you can get defensive value on day 2 and all over day 3 in this draft, where the really good offensive linemen, like you said, the really impactful tight end, I think you're going to have to take a bite at them early in the draft process.
Well, we'll see. I do kind of agree with half of that. I do agree that the defensive tackle draft is so spectacular that even if a Mason Graham fell to you, who's probably the best 3 technique there is in this draft, I still think that I'd be looking around at some other options as well, just because There is so much depth, and you can, like, if you don't get Mason Graham in the first round, you might be able to get Darius Alexander from Toledo or Ty Robinson in the second or third round, and those guys, who knows? I mean, they may wind up being better over time. So all I would say is just, who knows the way it's all going to shake out, but be open minded and don't, just because. Okay, for example, let's just say the Niners do a little due diligence on their season or a little autopsy, and they say our number one need is offensive tackle. Our number two need is defensive tackle, and our number three need is whatever, free safety, let's just say, or defensive end, whatever you want to say it is. It doesn't mean that you need to draft at first an offensive tackle and then a defensive tackle and then, a free safety. If Malachi Starks is sitting there, maybe you start with the free safety. If, you got the right player sitting there, maybe you start with a corner. Or maybe you start. I mean, what if Tedoroa McMillan? What if T-Mac from Arizona, who's 6'5", 210, and probably is going to run in the 4.3s? I mean, we'll see. We'll see at the combine. But let's say a guy like T-Mac runs in the 4.3s and he drops into your lap. You know what? He's not your first need. He's not your second need. He's not your third need. But he is a great player. So all I would say is just simplify. Just simplify. Don't Lots of people banged on Brad Holmes, the general manager of the Lions, formerly of the Rams, when he took Jahmyr Gibbs. Oh, you don't take a running back that early. Well, how many teams right now would trade you their running back for Jahmyr Gibbs? He's like one of the best backs in football. And the same thing happened with Jack Campbell. They drafted Jack Campbell. Everybody's like, dude, you can't take a stacked linebacker. At this point in the draft, I think it was like in the 20s maybe or in the teens. And it's like, you know what? Brad Holmes just was like, hey, we're going to go with who we want to go with. We have conviction on these players, and time has proved him correct. So I would say to John Lynch, don't overthink it. Don't go into this, we need this, and this. Go hunt for great players and see if you can get a bunch of them, because the reality is, if the Niners, let's say if they have 5 needs, if they fill all 5 of their needs and all those guys turn out to be good starters but nobody's great, they're probably not going to win the Super Bowl. If they go into the draft and get 5 players and they're all great and they don't necessarily fill their needs, I think they're closer to that Super Bowl than they would be if they filled their needs with just okay players. So that would be my message. It's just go for greatness. Don't worry if you have a guy blocked or this or that. Just go for greatness. Learn from the Lions, because the Lions really did. They didn't win the Super Bowl yet, but I think we all could learn from the Lions. They've done an amazing job at elevating their roster from nothing to spectacular. And I don't know if they're going to win the Super Bowl, Damon, because they do have Jared Goff, and they just lost both coordinators and 5 other coaches, and I don't know about Dan Campbell. Yeah. But you know what? I do know that Brad Holmes is one of the best GMs in football, and I do know that he seems to just go for great players, and he's hitting at a high rate, and it's like, wow, they've got all-pro players.
I think that the right time to add the running back, either in free agency or in overreach in a draft, is when you know that you're setting that running back up for success. And you can't set a running back up for success unless you've got the right offensive line. Look at what the Lions did. They added the running back behind the line. Look at what the Eagles just did. They added the running back once they had the line. Look at what
I agree with that totally.
Did. Yeah, look at what the 49ers
don't go for Ashton Gianti if you have a terrible line. Build up your line, and then see, maybe next year you can find Ashton Gianti. I totally agree.
Christian McCaffrey kind of, I don't want to say broke the rule book, because when he was added, Trent Williams showed up too, and Trent Williams is pretty state-of-the-art as an offensive lineman, and the 49ers offensive line was better in McCaffrey's first year than it was last year. It performed better. You say whatever you want. It was. McCaffrey sort of broke the rule where he gave you this incredible year, even though he didn't really have a great offensive line, but he was running to the left all the time, and Banks and Williams were clearing dudes out. So that worked for McCaffrey and any element of the 49ers running game to really win again. I think Drew Dahlman, offensive line draft, look for it. that to me, better blocking to improve your running game, to protect your quarterback is mandatory. And I hope that they do it. Larry,
I've been all over the map. I've been all over the map on this. I've been, some days I would love to see them go after T. Higgins because I don't love the wide receivers in this draft, and some days I'd love to see them go after DJ Reed because I think Robert Saleh, he probably would likely follow Robert Saleh, Damon, from the Jets to the Niners, and I could see that making sense. But the more I've thought about the Niner free agency and the offseason, the more I've kind of come over to your way of thinking, at least on half of it, which is I kind of think the best way to attack free agency is the way that the Packers and Gutekunst attacked it last year. They didn't say, hey, we're going to get 7 guys, or they didn't take the Commanders approach. I think Commanders might have signed 20 guys. They said, you know what? We are going to build through the draft, but we're going to try to cherry pick 2 great free agents. And they signed Xavier McKinney. He was awesome. He had like 7 or 8 takeaways by himself. And then they signed Josh Jacobs. And they got a great running back, and they got a great free safety, and the rest they did in the draft. Now, they didn't win, but they're one of the up-and-coming teams, and I think they're on the right path. But I like that plan. And my plan for the Niners this year would be, I like that Drew Dahlman idea. Why? Because even if you get a great center in the draft, generally it's going to take a year or 2 before that guy's really ready to go. And I don't want to wait a year or 2. So I do want to upgrade Brendel, but I don't want to wait a year or 2 on Jared Wilson from Georgia, Jake Majors from Texas, or one of these guys to figure it out. So I like the idea of Drew Dahlman. I think that makes a lot of sense, and maybe you might be able to get a deal on him because his
big evolution since Monday, Larry. You didn't like the idea on Monday. Here we are on Wednesday.
I know what I told you on Monday was I think there's a very good chance that they franchise him. Other people have said they're not going to franchise him. I've read a couple articles saying that they are going to franchise him. So I kind of thought, and I still think there's a chance that he is too rich for their blood. But to me, he makes sense. And the other guy that makes sense is DJ Jones. And I love the defensive tackle draft, so I'm totally fine, attacking this in the draft. But, man, DJ Jones is such a good guy. He's such a good player at this point. He gives you a pass rush, but he really gives you a dominating run defender. And I think I'd like to start there. I'd like to start with the Niners' main problem is they can't stop anybody from running for a yard, and they can't run for a yard. And that has to end on both sides of the ball. They have to be able to stop you, and they have to be able to run in short yardage. And this, to me, Dahlman and DJ Jones, I don't think they would break the bank. They're going to be costly, but it wouldn't just bust the budget. But I do think I would like to start there with like more known commodities, and then let's work around known commodity. Let's add more to the O-line. Let's add more to the D-line. But let's start with that veteran that you can plug in. And I also think Dahlman makes sense from the standpoint of if you move off of Jake Brendel, he is better than these other guys because he's more experienced. Like, he's better than Nugent. He's better than Zakel. So, like, if you're going to move off of a guy like Brendel, the guy who's going to come in has to be better, smarter, just, veteran. It's not going to be like some 4th-round pick from Boston College who just, like, is tough. It's because there's too many nuances to that position. There's too much responsibility in that position. So that's more and more like why I like Dahlman, the idea of Dahlman. I still think it's going to be probably more pricey than they think. But if they can, that's a great place to start. If you can start there, and then
I just think
work out.
You're saying, that this offense is pretty good. It just needs to get better in the red zone. I think you get better in the red zone with a better center. It's just that simple. I mean, I really do. I think the Dahlman is the rare guy who's a free, you signed T. Higgins. Congratulations. I guess you've improved your running game, your passing game. I don't know if you've helped your running game at all. Dahlman improves the passing game. He improves the running game. He improves the investment in Brock Purdy that I think you're about to make with protection. and it all fits. By the way, so everyone likes a good visual aid, right? And I think 49ers fans could use this visual aid because it will help them understand why they're also schizophrenic about their own football teams. I think you and I insist all the time how good and well run this organization has been. And a lot of people are very much on the other side of the fence where they're trying to prove a level of negligence, incompetence. You get the wrong people installed here. You're the wrong head coach, the wrong quarterback, the wrong GM. And it's not just this regime. Okay. And there's some agendas beyond that. But sometimes when you just put it in front of you, you can understand things. A visual aid helps. And so, Larry, I have added a visual aid. I don't know if there was a fancier, better way to do that, but I'd like to share this with you right now because it is going to explain everything you need to know about why 49er fans are equally gone bonkers over how disappointing their team is, while also hopefully realizing how good this team has been. Look at this. This is from CBS Sports. And if you're wondering why everyone around here is a little bit crazy, these are playoff wins since 2010. The 49ers' 13 playoff wins since 2010 are the third most in the entire NFL. The two teams that have gone to more playoff games, 3 of them have split 6 Super Bowls evenly between the 2 of them. Green Bay's got 12 playoff wins. They got a Lombardi trophy. Seahawks, 10 playoff wins, Lombardi trophy. Ravens, 9, Lombardi trophy. Rams, 7, Lombardi trophy. There is no Lombardi trophy under that 13. But to say that the 49ers are poorly run, negligent, badly coached, badly quarterbacked, badly anything, you don't get to be third on this graph if you're bad at what you do. It sucks that they have no Lombardi trophy on their bar graph. But Larry, that explains it all. Everything you need to know about the psychosis of Niners fans is right there. Look at all the inarguable success and the total flop of 0 Lombardi trophies along the way. That's brutal, man. I saw that. Holy shit, I got to share that on Wednesday.
That's good. That's good. That's a good one. I jotted that down. That will be on that's my 49ers stat of the day on Niners Nightly tonight.
By the way, you can share that. I have included that under your overlays. That is on the page. I've downloaded that on the shared show page. So you have that now, Larry. You can use that. Well,
it does not speak volumes, though. It's like, where do fans grow uneasy when you get to the ultimate game and don't win it? Because why? Because they're not there. The casual fan, I mean, I'm there, you're there, Niner fans are there, hardcore fans are there. But every time you go to the Super Bowl, you pick up all the casual fans. And a lot of them stick around. So when you go to the Super Bowl, you get a lot of people paying attention. And then when you don't win that Super Bowl, it's almost worse than falling short of making it to the Super Bowl, because you've gotten in the big game and now you haven't won it. So now, even though you're a great franchise, Buffalo Bills in the 80s and 90s, and you're losers. You're losers. The Braves fans were tough on them.
Yeah,
because they didn't win. They won 14 division titles, and they only won the one World Series in '95. And so it's like, hey, what the heck's wrong with you guys? Well, how about let's focus on the 14 straight division titles, and maybe not the fact that they only won once in the playoffs. But here's the thing too about it. I mean, are you from the camp of Billy Beane, where Billy Beane always used to be like, "Hey, man, winning in the playoffs is like in the stars. It's like there's nothing that you can do to actually prepare for it. It just happens or doesn't happen." He makes it sound like it's totally luck once you get to the playoffs. And I don't know if I agree with that. I don't think it is luck, but I know it's nuanced, though. You know what I mean? It's like, you don't just win in the playoffs just because you're good. You got to have the right set of coaches, the right players, the right quarterback, the right people handling the ball. And you got to play mistake-free ball. You got to have clarity of thought as far as Kyle Shanahan has not been great in these pressure moments. Let's call it for what it is.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's true too. It is. It's absolutely true. I just think a job of a general manager, where I halfway agree with Billy Beane. I do. A job of a general manager is to field a contender. Because when it comes to winning a championship it can't be assured to anybody. The Kansas City Chiefs just had the best record in all of football with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid in the magical 2 weeks that always works for them. It's assured. No, it's not. It's not assured to anybody. But contending is the responsibility of a general manager, and getting your team into the playoffs is really kind of the best you can do. It really is. Having a team that is ready to go compete for the biggest prize every single year. And that's something that the 49ers have done very, very well. Again, Bazi Mian says that graphic doesn't seem correct since I'm not seeing the Eagles on there. Well, this isn't about championships. This is about playoff games won. I'll go back to the graphic right there. So I bet you that the Eagles, So they got.
Well, the Eagles were down for a while.
The Eagles were down exactly. Since 2010, the Eagles were down. And the Eagles, clearly have won, 6 playoff games. Maybe they just got cut off here. I think this graphic, by the way, maybe have come out before Super Bowl Sunday. So even if the Eagles would then qualify, this graphic came out before the Super Bowl.
Just go look at the Eagles. We could call up the Eagles reference. I bet you they just didn't. They had a down period there. Let me see. I would say I don't think that's a misprint. I think that's I bet you the Eagles just have fewer than 6 playoff wins since 2010. Is that possible?
Well, you got to win 3 playoff games to get to a Super Bowl, and they've gone 2
So it was
Super
going
Bowl.
into this year. It was, but I mean that. So let's just assume the stat was going into this year before. So going into this year, well, I'll look it up. We'll look it up after the show. Maybe it's wrong. I don't think it's
either
wrong.
way. Look at it this way. Even if the Eagles are on there, they got 2 Lombardi trophies, but they don't have anywhere near the amount of playoff wins that the 49ers have had. And that includes, Jim Harbaugh stuff in there. So I just think that the 49ers get sucked in to the sales job of incompetence by people who are trying to sell the 49ers incompetence to grow attention to themselves. Now, I also, Larry, I got to share this with you because I got what I will call a sweet complaint.
You know what? That is right, by the way. I'm just looking at that stat. It is right. Okay, so since 2010, I'm going to give you the quick Eagles. They lost in the playoffs in the wild card round in 2010, so 0-1. Then they didn't make the playoffs again until 2013. They lost in the wild card round that time, 0-2. Then 2017, they won the Super Bowl, so they went 3-0. And then 2018, they lost in the division round, so that's no wins there. In 2019, they lost in the wild card round. There's no wins there. In 2021, they lost in the wild card round. There's no wins there. And then they lost the Super Bowl in 2022, but they won a couple of games there. So there's 5 wins. But the Denver Broncos are 6. They were the least. And then they lost the wild card last year. So if that stat was written before this year's playoffs, yeah, they have 5 playoff wins and 2 Super Bowl, or 5 playoff wins and 1 Super Bowl trophy coming into this year. Now they technically have probably more.
And
probably like
thing. And things change quickly. Things change quickly in this league.
Yeah.
The Eagles are already on the board as your odds-on betting favorite to repeat in Las Vegas next year. By the way, the 49ers, as we were saying, have the 3rd best playoff odds going into next year. Here they are. I wrote it all down. 49ers, 3rd best playoff odds to reach the Super Bowl from the NFC. Pardon me. That's important. It's Eagles at plus 600, Chiefs at plus 650. Fade the Chiefs. Ravens plus 650, Bills plus 750, Lions plus 1,000. Then it's the 49ers plus 1,500, followed by the Bengals at plus 1,800, Packers 2,000, Commanders 2,400, Rams 2,800. Lay off the Rams until you know what Stafford's doing. But that's amazing, given what we've just seen with the coming excitement that I think the Commanders offered everybody. The 49ers have better Super Bowl odds right now today than the Commanders do. And the Commanders were, very much the cause celeb of last year's playoff run.
It is interesting, too, when you look at those teams and you think about it for a second. The AFC has Josh Allen. The AFC has Lamar Jackson. They have Joe Burrow. They have C.J. Stroud.
That Mahomes,
They have Mahomes. They have Herbert if you love Herbert. Heck, they love Bo Nix if you love Bo Nix. So a lot of the good quarterbacks in the NFC. If you said who's the best quarterback in the NFC, I mean it's probably Jaden Daniels based on what we saw this year. I mean, but there's Hurts, there's Jaden Daniels, there's Jordan Love, there's Baker Mayfield.
It doesn't take very long to get to. It might be Baker Mayfield, which
Stafford,
speaks to the lack thereof depth.
But I'm just saying, like Purdy might be one of the better quarterbacks in the NFC. So I mean that all the powerhouse quarterbacks it looks like for the most part are in the AFC. We'll see about Caleb. We'll see about Jaden. We'll see. The Penix. I mean, there's some good young quarterbacks in the NFC as well. But Brock's one of them. So we'll see where it goes.
Like and subscribe. It's great to have you here. Thanks so much for watching. If you're watching over on Larry's channel, maybe pop on over to mine. Like and subscribe. If you're watching on my channel, pop over to Larry's. Like and subscribe. One hand washes the other. Thanks again to Sam's for sponsoring. I want to talk about the business that isn't fictitious, that needs to be done, and that apparently is the business around trading Deebo Samuel. Now, before we get into that, let me share something with you, Larry. This is from a fan, from somebody who watched us on Monday, responding to Monday's show. They wrote me this message. I took a screenshot, and I wanted to share it. It sounds like a criticism, but it's really a plea. And he writes, "Boss man." Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Why does everybody want to make a video about what the 49ers won't get for Deebo? I don't understand what we're trying to get rid of him for. And you guys are sitting here making videos about how they probably won't get much for them. So come on, man. Like, get these videos off YouTube. Don't tell a whole bunch of damn people in the NFL that you think Deebo isn't very good and we're selling him. Yeah, I might be a little delusional because I know how weak he is right now, but we don't need to let the whole NFL know that we think he's garbage. Stop making these videos. And I want to say his name is RC Yola 41500. RC, thanks for watching, and God bless you for thinking that any content creator on YouTube sways an NFL team a smidge. It's not happening. And by the way, there's nobody in the NFL watching YouTube to evaluate players. They watch film. And anyone who watches film sees Deebo absolutely pointing in the wrong direction. There is no bit of video dropping on this channel, my channel, Grant's channel, any channel that is informing any NFL decision maker about a singular player in the league, about to be drafted, playing in college, playing flag football. These guys are evaluating play. We talk about football. We do not speak their language. Believe that.
Well, I mean, it's just it's just a ridiculous notion. I mean, first of all,
we're devaluing Deebo with these negative videos.
First of all, yeah, I mean, so what? You don't want us to notice facts, and you want us to just bury our head in the sand on facts in the hope that the teams that would trade for him would also not see facts. I mean, come on. Right. I mean, it's giving us way more power than we actually have. Okay, that's one. Two, we're observers of the situation, and life's too short. If the Niners get less for Deebo because I made a video about it, then so be it. And then they get less for Deebo. I think you and others need to start coming to grips with the reality of the situation, which is that he's done, and he's not worth it. He's not worth very much, and you're not going to get very much. So
I don't think
stop pretending. I've seen articles. I read an article this morning that said that they were going to get a 3rd-round pick for him. I would be shocked. Absolutely shocked. My mouth would just be draped open. If they get a 3rd-round pick for Deebo Samuel, John Lynch is the greatest general manager in the history of general managers. I mean, they're not getting that. They're just not. Now, the question is, it sounds like, if you listen to the 49ers, that they're willing to take a significant cap hit this year to get some compensation for him, as opposed to, releasing him with a post June 1st designation, not taking as big a cap hit, but getting nothing for him. It sounds like when John Lynch says, hey, we're not in the business of giving away good football players, that they're trying to lay the groundwork for, they want some compensation back. And I think that's an okay stance to take. And if they feel like they can take the cap hit and John's deal is they all get evaluated differently, right? Parag gets evaluated by the cap. Shanahan gets evaluated by the wins and the success, and Lynch gets evaluated by the draft and by the deals that he makes. So he doesn't want to give Deebo Samuel away because he knows it's on his ledger and it's not necessarily going to look good. But I don't think they're going to get anything more than a day 3 pick and probably a mid day 3 pick. I've been wrong before, but if I'm wrong, I'm gladly will say I'm wrong. But I don't. This idea that you're going to get a bonanza for the guy. People are like, well, don't trade him in the division. Don't trade him in the conference. Why?
First of all,
the same reason the Niners aren't going to get much for him is the same reason they want to get rid of him. He's not good anymore.
The right time to trade Deebo was before last year's draft. The right time to trade Deebo was probably 2 years ago, but you were in the Super Bowl, so you're not doing that. And look, I'm not just going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I do believe that Deebo is still a good football player, but he's not nearly as good as he used to be. It's certainly the wrong time to be investing in him. And in terms of any compensation in the draft, beauty is going to be in the eye of the beholder. Some teams are going to look at Deebo and just go, nope, not interested. Other teams might feel differently. You got to find who those other teams are. Deebo, I think, also has to admit, you're not exactly the X or Y that you used to be. You are a high-paid special teamer gadget guy at this point. The right team, the right coach, by the way, I think can get and extract an awful lot of value out of that. But you're not going to invest an awful lot of value to bring that player in with the money that's also attached to him. Kyle Posey, Larry, of Niners Nation, talked out what really the options are. There are 4 options available for the 49ers. Let Deebo just play out the final year of his extension. You got miserable Deebo on your team all year. Number 2, release him with the post-June 1st designation, save $17 million over the next 2 seasons. Number 3, you trade Deebo ahead of the NFL draft for compensation to use in this year's draft. Or number 4, you wait to trade Deebo during training camp or early in the regular season after the draft once a team either decides they missed out on their free agent, their wide receiver, or somebody gets hurt. And now all of a sudden you have a desperate team willing to give you a little bit more because they need Deebo in a way that, before whatever created the desperate situation happened. So there's those things to count on. If I'm the 49ers, I'm not waiting for any moving parts. I am trading him for whatever ahead of this draft. That's what I would do.
Yeah, I mean, Lombardi has a great breakdown on this where he went deep dive on, the larger plan at wide receiver. And it's really good. It's in the SF Standard. It's got charts. It's probably, it was published on February the 10th. So 2 days ago, Monday, he put this out.
It's like 8-part magnum opus on the 49ers offseason, right? Lombardi's got a big series coming.
This one's just on the wide receiver position. And basically he just outlines that, Deebo's 29 and the Niners are going to try to move him ahead of the final season of his contract. And he writes that a $15.4 million option is due March 22nd. So that the 49ers would presumably like to execute a move before that. They don't want to pay him that 15.4 on March 22nd, which is obviously well ahead of the draft, a month before the draft. So, he says the 49ers seem willing. Now, this is the part that this is what I kind of just referenced. He says the 49ers seem willing to shoulder the $31.5 million of dead money on their books if it means netting worthwhile draft compensation in return. And then he says if a trade isn't consummated, the Niners will likely release Debo with a post-June 1st designation, a maneuver that will stave off most of the dead cap or dead money impact to 2026. So he says the Niners have enough 2025 cap space to maintain optionality between the two paths. I just get the sense that John Lynch wouldn't have said we're not in the business of giving away football players if he really intended to release him. So I think the Niners are fishing for a trade. And, the one thing about him, Damon, he is a one of one. I mean, who's like Debo? There's really nobody like Debo. So, and then, everybody, looks at the Niners and, people want to pick off what the Niners have. It just seems like, their coaches, their executives, everybody wants a taste of the Niners. The Debo thing is interesting because since he is one of one, and he did operate behind a Niners offensive line that we all know wasn't very good. There may be a team out there that looks at that and says, you know what? He operated behind a bad offensive line. You get him here to Baltimore behind our line, and we think he's got 2 really good years left, and we think he's a championship player. I also think that Debo cares enough about winning. I think he's much more of a competitor than people think. So, like, all this talk about, maybe he'll go to Carolina. I don't think he's going to Carolina. I think he might even take less money to go to a team like Philadelphia. I mean, he was wearing the Philly jersey. He was celebrating their victory with A.J. Brown. He obviously has a relationship with A.J. Brown. I think he would like to stick it to the Niners and win and go somewhere where he can win. So I would say the teams that can win, maybe that would be Baltimore, the Chargers, maybe Philly. I think he's going to try to go somewhere where he's not just like, hey, what happened to Debo? Oh, he's making a few bucks in Carolina on his way out of the league. I don't think that's what he's going to choose. I think he's going to choose, I think he wants to be on a good team. Now, I don't know if the Niners will get what they want, but I think he wants to be on a good team.
Let me give you the 4 options. And again, Niners Nation, Kyle Posey, I sort of poached this. He had the New York Giants included. I'm going to eliminate them because, again, remember, the 49ers have told Debo, you go find the trade. I don't think Debo is looking to trade himself to one of the worst teams in football, right? Neither is his agent. So let's talk about realistic teams that Debo might be able to go to.
I do have the odds too, by the way, in front of us.
Huh?
I do have the odds. So Washington is the favored team.
All right. So we'll think about it. The Commanders have cap space galore. They have Adam Peters, a connection that will either expedite this to happen or prevent it from happening. What does Adam Peters really feel about Debo Samuel? That's the magic question there. They hold the 29th overall pick in the upcoming draft. They've got a 2nd rounder and a 3rd rounder from the Eagles, but then they don't pick again to the 5th round. So
that's the pick they would probably trade.
The 5th rounder is the pick that they could probably trade. But if there was some desire for Debo and they felt that they had to outbid another team for Debo, maybe that Washington/Philadelphia 3rd rounder could be in play. Probably wishful thinking. Let's talk about the Broncos. One of the things that adding Debo, it would be.
One other thing to throw in there, Damon. One other thing to throw in is that the 49ers, if they move Debo, are probably going to need a receiver. And as we outlined, it's not a great receiver draft, and it's not a great receiver market as far as the free agent market. So all these teams that he potentially could go to, maybe you get a 3rd round pick. I don't think so. But maybe you get a 5th or 6th round pick and a receiver coming back. So I just factor that in because the receiver is going to be a hard need to fill. And if you move Debo, it's a need that you're going to need to fill. So any of these teams, if they have a receiver they could throw back to the Niners that could make the Niner team, that also I think could be part of the mix. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. You maybe a player back in the deal helps absorb the fact that you're not getting a premium draft pick, and the player that you get back in the deal wouldn't be a premium player. That'd be a little bit of a flyer too, but it's an NFL tested body that you'd have a little clay to work with. The Broncos. So again, I think Sean Payton is the kind of a coach who looks at Debo and sees more usability than other guys. Sean Payton's a very creative play caller. He gave us Taysom Hill. I think he looks at Debo as maybe a Taysom Hill, obviously not at the quarterback tight end position, but just another wrinkle, a Swiss Army knife.
No, I think you're right on this one on the money. Here's why. Because the talk out of Denver this week is that Sean Payton is hell-bent to go get himself a new, what they call the Joker position, right? Now, he's got a part in his offense. You mentioned Taysom Hill, right? That Joker position. And what it is it's like an H-back, running back, tight end. It could be a wildcat quarterback. It's the Taysom Hill, like you direct snap it to Taysom Hill. Well, you replace Taysom Hill with Deebo Samuel. So, yeah, I do think since the Broncos are hot to trot on this quote-unquote Joker position, I could see them, wanting Deebo. I don't know what they would give, but I could definitely see them wanting Deebo.
There's another wrinkle that Kyle Posey offered up that I think helps make an argument that the Broncos could be interested too. If you're trading for Deebo, you better hope you're not facing a lot of man. And you're not looking to attack very much downfield with Deebo either. Sean Payton and his offense with Bo Nix, again, quarterback on a rookie deal, which helps absorb the cost of Deebo. Plus, Broncos got a nice cap space to play with. They got about $30 million to play with. 39%, nearly 40% of Bo Nix's passes are between 8 and 9 yards, and that's where Deebo operates, while the other 22% are behind the line of scrimmage, where Deebo operates. So, Again, conceptual and monetary and coach imagination fit maybe in Denver. The Texans, again, quarterback on a rookie deal. He's got history with the head coach. Would the Texans, though, gamble on a wide receiver who's got injury concerns when they just watched their season underachieve because they had injury concerns among their wide receivers? Tank Dell got hurt. Nico Collins got hurt. But the Texans is a maybe. And then finally,
I don't love that fit just because they have Stephon. Well, I mean, Diggs is a free agent, and Robert Woods is too. So
he might leave.
But they still have Nico Collins, Tank Dell, John Mechie. I mean, they've got some guys. But with Diggs being a free agent, if they wanted to let him walk, yeah, Deebo could go there. Deebo could go there.
Steelers is the final team that is brought up here, saying that according to a source from another NFL team, Samuel and his agent, Tory Dandy, are absolutely going to attempt to engage the Steelers, making them an immediate candidate if they share the same interest. Again, Kyle Posey had that. Kyle Posey, Niners Nation. I don't want to take credit for
what's the connection with the Steelers again?
Just that a source from another NFL team said that Tory Dandy, who is Deebo's agent, has said that he is interested in engaging Pittsburgh. So there you go.
That's interesting. Pittsburgh has George Pickens, Van Jefferson, Calvin Austin, but there's no question Najee's a free agent. So, they don't necessarily have a running back. They kind of have shown, Damon, that they like that kind of jack of all trades player because they have Cordero Patterson on their roster. Heck, maybe the Niners would take Cordero Patterson coming back. Or maybe George Pickens. I mean, I know the Niners, Pickens is a diva. He doesn't really block. He doesn't really fit the Niner culture. But, I definitely think the Steelers, from what I've heard from my buddies who were there, have soured big time on George Pickens and his lack of professionalism. So, yeah, they wanted him last year. Who knows? Maybe the Niners could make a deal there. That one would be very interesting. Very interesting.
So again, Deebo Watch is officially on, and what I want the Niners to do is move in a direction with purpose, with authority. I don't want an offseason of thumb twiddling and waiting for perfect. When you got something pretty good, make a deal. I want this I want Brock's contract done the minute the league year opens up and says you can do new business. I want it done.
And I think you're going to get your wish on that because it really sounds like the 49ers, according to the Diana Rossini report, it sounds like that there's no hiccups, that they've communicated well, that they've had the initial conversations with Kyle Strongen, that the agent for Brock Purdy, that they like before you have to have a deal, you have to have the basic agreement on the framework of the deal, and it sounds like they're there. So, I agree. Especially if you do want a Drew Dahlman. If you want one of the top offensive linemen or a DJ Jones, you want to, or T Higgins or anybody who's considered a relative top tier type free agent. And I kind of think the Niners are, they cleared out that $50 million for Brock, but they also would like to add a free agent or two. If they don't have this deal done with Brock, then you're kind of taking risks in free agency. I think you want to have the ink dry on that thing. I think ideally, if you could get that done by March 1st, then you get 10 days to kind of have your meetings. Okay, we got the Brock deal done. Here's where it sits. Here's what we have to spend in free agency. Let's hatch a plan of attack. To me, the best plan, get it done by March 1st, have your meetings going into free agency so that you can hit the ground on the 12th and just, have everything done.
The other bit of business that I guess concerns a guy who's about to be a former 49er has to do with Brandon Staley. A lot of connections to Brandon Staley joining Kalen Moore's staff in New Orleans as defensive coordinator. I know that shitting on Brandon Staley became a very in vogue, fun thing to do for 49ers fans. I don't know how fair that was. I think saying that Brandon Staley is, an irredeemable bad hire is way out of line. I think he's a young man who's got 20 years of coaching in this league in front of him still. It didn't obviously work out with the 49ers in any way. And since it was never really defined, I don't know if we even know what to criticize. But Brandon Staley going to New Orleans to be a defensive coordinator again, if I were Kalen Moore, I'd make that hire.
Yeah, there's no question that Brandon Staley gets, the fans' impression of Brandon Staley and Brandon Staley are two dramatically different things. I mean, the players really, really like this guy, and they didn't need to. They didn't need. Diamador Lenore said he's the Kyle Shanahan of defense. I mean, and this is a guy who is just a straight truth teller. So as he sees it, at least. So that's his impression. This is a guy who's pretty smart and kind of calls it the way it is. And he's just signed a new deal. He's not trying, every time anybody says anything, what do you expect him to say? Okay. Oh my God. How tired is that? It's like, just because a guy compliments somebody doesn't mean that, it's like he had no other option. Yeah. You can say nothing. There's all kinds of guys that don't like other guys in the room, and they guess what? They don't say anything. When they're asked about them, they just are like, no comment, or they don't say much. You don't just because not everybody's a freaking liar. You know what I mean? Fred Warner said some nice things about Brock. What do you expect him to say? So now you're telling me that Fred Warner doesn't like Brock Purdy, that it's all bogus? It's like, I get it. It's like, he's speaking publicly. What are the odds he's going to rip him? Yeah, but there's a lot of in between there, right?
And
if he doesn't love him, he doesn't. It's not like he has to rip him. But he would say nothing. He would say nothing, or he would say very little. He wouldn't go out on his ski. He wouldn't go out over his skis and be like, Brock Purdy is the guy. If he had hesitations, if he had reservations, he would just kind of be like, hey, you know what? Brock's our guy, and we're behind him 100%. He would have just cut it short. So all this, like, what do you expect him to say? Is just, it gets a little like, okay, so everything's a gigantic conspiracy theory.
Well, but Larry, here's the thing. Fred Warner, what Fred Warner also has on his side, not just his own opinion and his relationship, he's got hundreds of data points that suggest Brock Purdy is a lot better than his detractors want to admit he is. As a matter of fact, to tell anyone Brock Purdy is bad at this, you have to ignore a mountain of data points to reach that conclusion. You have to say, okay, so even though these data points matter for every other quarterback in football, for Brock, they really don't matter. And I don't like him because he's a little bit small and he was drafted last.
I mean, Joe Montana said it best. He's like, hey, look, and Joe's like kind of, you can tell he's sort of watching. He lives here, and so he sees a lot of it, and he hears a lot of the dialogue. And he's like, hey, look, this guy's accomplished more than 5 or 6 other guys that have already gotten paid big, big dollars. So what are we really talking about on this whole thing? He's going to get paid his big dollars. Somebody had the report this week, Damon, that his money is likely to be between 55 and 60 AAV. The guarantees and all those things matter more, but that is an interesting barometer, and I would say that's what I would expect. I mean, I've talked to his agent. I've talked to people who are pretty privy to some of the Niners thinking. I think that's exactly what I'm hearing, that he's going to sit between 55 and 60 million dollars of AAV, that it's not going to be some record-setting deal, but it's not going to be some bargain basement. He's making the same money as Baker Mayfield. It's like, no, because the guy's been to a Super Bowl. He's played well in it. So they're gonna compensate him. Now, I think Tim Kawakami had the interesting note, though. Kawakami had the interesting note. He said it might be a shorter term deal. And that could be just not only a hedge on Brock, that could be a hedge on Kyle. That could be a hedge on John. That could be a hedge on they won 6 games this year. What if they go 2 big years on Brock? What if they went 3-year deal on Brock instead of a 6-year deal like some of these guys are getting? And the next 3 years, the Niners go and win 5 games, 6 games, and 5 games. Well, guess what? John's out. Kyle's out, and they're probably moving on from Brock. So I think that, at that point, they may have structured this just so. I'm not saying that Jed doesn't believe in John and Kyle. I think he does. But I think if you go shorter term deal, you're at least you're giving yourself a much more unencumbered or not unencumbered, but like if you decide to go in a new direction and part ways with Kyle and John, you then can try to get a head coach or a general manager, and you don't have a quarterback that's tied to them. So I think that could be the attractive thing as well, is that, give John and Kyle 2 or 3 more years to see if they can get it done. This is year 8. This next year will be year 9. Nobody gets forever. So maybe you give them 12 years. Which would be 3 more years, and maybe you sign Brock up for 3 more years, and 3 years from now, if the Niners are in NFC Championship games and in Super Bowls, and then you extend them, and you're like, okay, let's keep it going. And 3 years from now, if they've won a combined 15 games and they haven't made the playoffs, then you say goodbye to the regime, including Brock, and you start fresh. So I kind of think that's where it's going. They're going to take care of Brock. They're going to give him big money, but it's going to be a shorter term deal. And if it goes well, they'll give him another contract and give John and Kyle another contract. If it doesn't go well, I think 3 years from now, they're all gone.
It's a whole. I totally agree with you. That is exactly what the 49ers, I think, are trying to set up here. This is the second bite at the apple that this regime gets. Right. They had their initial splash, then they had their Jimmy, then they had the Trey, which was enough to get everybody involved fired, but they didn't, because Brock Purdy fell from the irrelevant heavens and allowed everyone to maintain their status as we still know what the fuck it is we're doing. But they are tied together. Kyle Shanahan doesn't get another quarterback and another regime.
Well, let me interject too, Damon, because nothing happens accidentally. What did Kyle say specifically about Brock this offseason? He said, Brock is the only quarterback I want here the rest of my time here. As if to say, as if Jed had already told him, that's fine, we'll give Brock the money, but this is it. You know what I mean? This has to work, or I don't know. I don't know that Jed said this has to work or you're out of here. But for Kyle to say definitively, like something so random out of the blue like that, Brock's the only quarterback I want here in my entire time, for the rest of my time here. That's almost like saying, if it doesn't work with Brock, I'm done.
I give him a 4-year deal, 3 years guaranteed. Team option for year 4. And I get an awful lot of upfront money to make. I mean, here's the thing, Brock Purdy, I just don't think he's a money is my Jesus kind of guy. I think Brock wants an opportunity just, to go home, tell his wife, yeah, we're never going to have to worry about money again for the rest of our lives. You like that? I do. I like that. How much money do you need to not worry about money for the rest of your lives? About this much. We're good. And I just think that he actually would lean in and tell his agent, you don't have to take everything off the table right here because it's time to win. Our window is trying to be held open right now. We'll see where it all goes. Brock, 50, 55 million. Get ready for it. That's where we're going with this.
Yeah. But I mean, I think shorter term, and it's funny, people are like, I don't think Jed gave Kyle an ultimatum. Okay, that's fine. I don't have a source. I'm just telling you, I'm just reading tea leaves. I'm not claiming I have sources. I don't have sources. But I did find it very interesting that without any prodding, without anybody really leading him there, Kyle Shanahan volunteered that. The Brock Purdy is not only my guy, he's the only quarterback I want the rest of my time here. As almost like we're gonna make this happen with Brock here, or I'm not gonna be here. So I don't know. I'm a Kyle Shanahan fan, right? I really believe in Kyle Shanahan. I really do. I know there's a lot of people that don't. That's fine. And I'm not saying he's perfect. I know he's not perfect. But I do believe in Kyle Shanahan. I do believe Kyle Shanahan is one of the best coaches in football. I do believe Kyle Shanahan's offense works and that it produces points. And I think this year, those stats that I read you about where that offense sat in a year where it was a disaster and you had tragedies and injuries and guys out for the year and your top three weapons who had 40 touchdowns last year, at 2 this year, all these things backslid. And it wasn't a good year, but still there were some good offensive indicators. I think Kyle Shanahan is a good coach. I think he's a lot like Andy Reid in Philly. And if you kiss off Andy Reid in Philly, you don't get Andy Reid in Kansas City. And so Philly felt good about it because they went to Peterson and they got it done. Now they've gone to Sirianni. They've got 2. So they're cool, right? They're fine. Hey, they're okay with Andy Reid moving on. But if the Niners move off of Shanahan and he goes and wins 3 rings somewhere, man, that's going to be a bitter pill to swallow. Now, and I'm a believer that he will. Other people are a believer that he won't. So we'll find out. Time's going to tell. I'm not saying I have all the answers. I don't. I'm just telling you what I think based on what I'm seeing.
All I know is that if Kyle does win, the amount of people who hate him today will be the first to tell you, I believed in him all along. And the minute someone loses again, you're going to have a whole bunch, a total, prisoner of the moment fan. Do you realize today, I got friends in Kansas City, Bob Fesco, who's been doing a morning show there, Soren Petro, these guys, literally go ahead and look at their Twitter handles right now. They've spent, since getting back from the Super Bowl, they've been defending whether or not Patrick Mahomes is a good quarterback.
Crazy.
After everything Patrick Mahomes has given 7 consecutive AFC title games, and today there is a certain percentage of Kansas City fans saying, "Is it time to move on? Is Patrick Mahomes
really
overrated?" Yes. Here's the thing: the amount of fucking
trade him here.
The amount of fucking assholes who watch football and try to join the conversation with something clever to say, it's insane. It's insane. Again, if you're ready to tap out on Patrick Mahomes, you should not be able to watch football ever again. Like, we should take that off your plate. Like, you don't even appreciate anything. If you can't appreciate Patrick Mahomes the day after he loses a Super Bowl in Kansas City, you shouldn't be able to eat barbecue anymore. No more Royals games. You should just be thrown out of the city limits.
Well, I mean, let's just say this. Maybe we all need to kind of take a deep breath and say this together as one. It's really, really, really hard to win these things. Mm-hmm. It's really hard. Now, Kansas City has made it look easy. But, man, Patrick Mahomes, to me, the one thing that I didn't notice until after the Super Bowl, and damn it, because I cost myself some money on Super Bowl Sunday. The Chiefs for the season, Damon, were plus 59 in point differential, plus 59. The Eagles were plus 160. So the Eagles were just a much better football team. And what happened was the greatness and the pure genius of Reed and Mahomes kind of camouflaged or, hid their weaknesses all the way up until Super Bowl Sunday.
That's what great quarterbacks and coaches do.
Yeah,
They're good enough to carry inferior teams to places they might not have gone to.
Guess who had a better point differential than Kansas City this year? Denver. Guess who had a better point differential than Kansas City this year? Tampa. I mean, these teams those are okay teams, but they're not championship teams. The Eagles were plus 160. I think it was the second best to the Lions in the entire league. So, I mean, the Eagles are just a better team. They were a bigger, better, more physical team this year. They were better, and it showed on Super Bowl Sunday. And once again, back to Brian Billick. But Brian Billick said it, and it's totally true. And he's like, the hardest thing for football people and football fans and coaches alike. He didn't try to say just for fans he's like, for football people. And it's the hardest thing to do is to separate the quarterback versus what's going on around the quarterback. Patrick Mahomes is an awesome quarterback. The guy makes great, brilliant decisions all the time. But guess what? If the other team can rush 4 and drop 7, and their 4 down defensive linemen can beat your 5 offensive linemen, you have problems. And that's what happened in this game. They didn't blitz. Fangio dropped 7, and they absolutely were instinctive and really reactive to Mahomes. They read his eyes. He was running for his life. He's doing figure eights in the backfield. Eagles defensive linemen are putting pressure on him. They're coming off blocks. Everywhere he turned, there was another guy. So when a team can get it done with their front 4, and that kind of leads us to the Myles Garrett thing. A lot of people want Myles Garrett, and I get it. I totally get it, because Robert Saleh in New York really exclusively rushed 4 and dropped 7. That's what he likes to do.
When the Niners were at their very defensive best, when any football team is at its defensive best, you're pressuring the quarterback with 4.
Right. And so that means you have 7 defenders in coverage. And the people who call for blitz all the time, they're people that don't watch the All-22 for the most part, because if you watch the All-22, you see the cost of blitzing. But if you don't watch the All-22, it's just you don't see the cost of it. And why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you want to blitz if you're just watching the sideline tight? Because you're not seeing the coverage down the field and what it does to the coverage. So, I hear people all the time, they got to blitz more. They got to blitz more. It's like, first of all, if you blitz a quarterback as smart as Mahomes, he sees where the blitz is coming, and you're giving him defined reads and almost like kind of instructing him where to go with the football. And you're making the game kind of easy for him. So it's much more difficult if you rush 4, drop 7, and make him find the open guy in a sea of defenders. And it's harder to do. So,
let's just say Myles Garrett would be, obviously.
He'd be incredible.
If you could add the Incredible Hulk to the Avengers, you probably should. You got all these. You got Thor, you got Iron Man, but yeah, if you can get the Incredible Hulk, get that guy. But you're not going to be able to get that guy. I just don't think it's realistic. Look, it would take.
Well, you can get him. It's just not going to be cheap.
The 49ers would have to send their first 2 picks and Deebo Samuel to Cleveland for Myles Garrett, and maybe
more than that. Maybe more than that. And the bottom line is you're going to have to trade an awful lot. If you want Myles Garrett, you're going to have to trade an awful lot. There's a great article that I put up on my Twitter from Joel Corey, who's a guy I've had on my show before. He's a former agent, or maybe even a current agent, and he writes an article, an agent's take on the Myles Garrett thing. He says why trading Myles Garrett won't be easy, and he goes into. It's 14 paragraphs. I won't even try to summarize it for you. I would tell everybody to check it out, though. But basically, he says that a team that is going to trade for Myles Garrett is going to have to absolutely blow them away. And he throws out a few trades here that not potential trades, past trades, and like what it took to get big time players. And here's what Khalil Mack went for: a 2019 first round pick, 24th overall, a 2019 sixth round pick, a 2020 first round pick, 19th overall, a 2020 third round pick. The Bears also got a 2020 second round pick and a conditional 2020 fifth round pick.
Yeah.
So that's a lot, man. That is a lot.
But Luka Doncic to get that done.
That's a lot. I mean, basically they traded everything but the Sears Tower to freaking get Khalil Mack away from the Raiders. So let's just rehash that. That's two first round picks, a sixth round pick, a second round pick, a third round pick, and a fifth round pick. I mean, two firsts, a sixth, a third, a second, and a fifth.
Yeah, you're basically
so 2 ones, and that's 6 draft choices and 2 number ones.
Yeah.
So let's get real here, man. All these people talking about, just give them the 11th pick for okay. First of all, there's going to be a bidding war. There's other teams that want Myles Garrett. He's the answer to everybody's prayers. So, this idea that the Niners, that's 6 picks and 2 ones. Do you want to trade 6 picks and 2 ones? Because I understand the value of Myles Garrett. I really do. But I love this draft. And I know there's a bunch of people in my mentions ripping me saying that, you just want a bunch of draft picks and nobody knows if they're going to be any good. Okay, fine. That's fine. But this is a loaded – don't listen to me. Listen to Daniel Jeremiah. Daniel Jeremiah said last year he had like 14 guys, I think, that were defensive linemen that had like, first round grades or something like that.
Grades.
Yeah, day 1 grades. And then he had like 3 times as many as that this year. So it's the defensive tackle draft this year is absolutely loaded. There's all kinds of good defensive linemen. If anything, I would try to do the other thing. Don't trade all your picks for one guy. Take your 11th pick, move down 10, 15 spots, add 4 or 5 more picks, and then go draft 5 good defensive linemen. And if you do draft 5 good defensive linemen and 3 good offensive linemen, guess what? You're going to have a better line. You're going to have a better team. So you're right. There is a failure rate. So you might miss on 1 or 2. And that's up to Lynch in the personnel department. But the all in on 1 is risky. I don't know that anybody understands that. It seems like nobody seems to get that. The Niners went all in on Trey Lance. They missed. It cost them dearly. They went all in on Javon Hargrave. They missed. He was just okay. They depleted a lot of their depth to make that move. And that's Javon Hargrave. If you're going to get Myles Garrett in the prime of his career away from every other team in pro football, you're going to have to pay a king's ransom that's going to include a lot of draft capital. And in some years I'd be for that. This year there's so many good defensive linemen that I'd think I'd rather just keep all my picks.
I'd rather have the 6 picks. I'd rather have the 6 picks and Dre Greenlaw. You know what I mean? I'd rather have Dre Greenlaw re-signed and you take those 6 picks, then you're not re-signing Dre Greenlaw. You're trading all those picks, and now you got Myles Garrett, and Myles Garrett needs to stay healthy for the remainder of his career for this to even work out.
You were right there front and center for the Warriors-Raptors finals. Who had the better roster? The Warriors. But who had guys hurt? The Warriors. Who had the deeper roster? The Raptors. Who won the title? The Raptors. So, it's and people are like, well, depth was not the problem for the 49ers this year. It's like, what? What are you talking about?
Very much was a problem.
It absolutely was the problem. And they were starting Devondre Campbell.
How about this? Here's the real nice part. If we're talking about where we're really operating from here, Robert Saleh is back. Your defense just got better before you added a single player.
Yeah.
You have a special teams situation where now your special teams won't be actively helping the other team win by the week. That's where the 49ers special teams was so bad this year, Larry. They did more to help the opponent than they did their own team. So Saleh back in the room, special teams turnover, that alone is winning 2 more games than you won last year. Your last place schedule adds 2 more wins than you won last year. I think the 49ers roll out of bed with a bad draft and fucking everything up and win 9 games this year.
It's a much easier schedule.
All you got to do is be a little bit better, and I think you're a playoff team. And if you get a lot bit better, well, then you're a contender again. And so I know it felt like the Niners were a million miles away from the playoffs this year because they were, but they're not a million miles away from next year's playoffs. I don't think they are. Are you ready to do some supers?
I agree. Yeah. Yeah, let's go. We got some supers here. We got Fuji Simeon. He says, your take on Dak saying the Cowboys are next for a Super Bowl. What would trading Debo get? A 5th at best. I'm on record as saying a 5th, but you know what? They may be able to be creative here. The one thing that makes the Debo compensation a question mark is he is a true one of one. Like, if you like him, he's a gadget guy, but if you like his gadget, there's nobody else that really does it. I mean, there's a few guys, but they're not even close. So I would say, if there's somebody falls in love with Debo, maybe you get a 4th, but there's no way you're getting a 3rd.
I'm going to use the old Jerry Garcia line about the Grateful Dead. Jerry Garcia would say, the Grateful Dead, we're like licorice. Not everybody likes licorice, but the people that do really like licorice. And I think we got Debo's like licorice. It's not for everyone, but if you really like that, you might really be interested in him in a way that we no longer are remaining here in the Bay. So,
you know what's funny about licorice, by the way? I love licorice. I do love licorice. Licorice.
Do you like black licorice, though? I'm not talking about like Twizzlers or red. I'm talking about.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's licorice is black licorice.
Yes. I like it.
If you said, hey, if somebody says, hey, I've got a cognac, it's a licorice, it has a licorice flavor. It's not going to be red licorice. It's going to be black licorice. So there's that. But I like black licorice. As a little kid, I used to get black licorice and pretend it was chaw and spit the black juice out. I'd get a big thing of the black licorice and just start chewing it and spitting it, and my mom was like, she was sickened by it.
Yeah, no, take the little licorice bites. I would put them in here like a dip.
Oh yeah, and black licorice is actually kind of an acquired taste.
It is.
As far as Dak, I mean, come on, Dak. I mean, I saw what Dak said as well. He's like, well, if the Eagles were close and this and that, and congrats to them, and we could be next. It's like,
how about this? Let me say this about Dak Prescott. The Niners got a lot of problems, or the Cowboys got a lot of problems. Dak Prescott is not on top of the list of Cowboy problems. He's a pretty good player. He really is. But
I mean, the owner is the problem there.
It's that owner that you got to worry about.
Yeah, and his idiot kid. Joseph Ernberg, red zone is the main offensive problem. Yards are not as important as points.
True.
No doubt. Joseph, you're absolutely right on that. The Niners have to be. The Niners were a tire fire in the red zone on both sides of the ball. They were horrible. This was the one year that I can ever remember where the 49ers, if you just looked at where they ranked in offensive and defensive efficiency yards per game, they look pretty good. They're like top 10 in both. But then when you get to points, they were like 22nd in defense. So, points matter. Yards are nice. Points matter. I used to have a buddy who scouted in the Canadian League with me. He used to say, yards are like biceps and points are like triceps. Triceps matter. Biceps don't. I was like, and this is a football offensive lineman. So, if you have strong triceps, you can push somebody out. Strong biceps, it looks good at the beach. Drew says drafting best player available is how good teams do it in the first 3 rounds. After that, drafting for need is acceptable. They need to recalibrate their strategy. Drew, you're absolutely spot on. Absolutely spot on. How about this? Just keep looking for great players. Just keep looking. Don't overcomplicate it. It's like anything else. It's like if I ask you to do something basic, you can do it. But if I ask you to do 2 things that are basic, now it's a little harder. If I ask you to do 3 things that are basic, now it's even harder. It's like, can you pat your head? Can you pat your head and rub your stomach at the same time? It's like, I don't know. I don't know if I can. Yeah, can you do both? But I think if you just simplify and just say, screw your needs and just go find greatness. Let's draft as many great players as possible. And guess what? At the end of the day, if all of a sudden we've drafted 3 great linebackers and we didn't need 3 great linebackers, we can trade, right? We can trade. Go get great players. Chris Olig just says, hey, here's a deuce.
$2. Thank you very much, Chris.
Chris says, Larry, have you scouted Savion Williams? Yes, I have. TCU receiver, 6'5", 225 pounds. He's going to be one of the guys to watch at the combine for sure. They used him as a wildcat quarterback in short yardage, and they direct snapped it to him, and he ran. He played opposite this guy Jack Betch, who's sadly his brother died in that tragic New Orleans New Year's Day thing. His brother played at Princeton, I think, and he played at TCU. And he was actually, Jack Betch was one of the real standout players at the Senior Bowl. But he doesn't run great. Savion Williams is big, strong, fast. I love Savion Williams. And he could go anywhere. I've seen him anywhere from the 7th round if he runs in the 4.6s, like some people think he will. And then in the 3rd round, if he runs, as you state here, in the 4.4s. And I would agree with that wholeheartedly across the board. I love Savion Williams. I think he would be a great wide receiver for the 49ers. Love him. Absolutely love him. I think he would be a fantastic day 3 pick. If he runs 4.4 or anything, anything sub 4.5 at that height and that tape, he's going to go probably late 3rd.
Anyway, what's the difference between a 4.4 and a 4.6? About $4 million.
Yeah, a lot. Yes, quite a bit. Isn't that interesting? Joseph Ernberg says, we went 6-11. F the chart. Get the job done.
Again, so easy to say that, right?
I love the negative. Nobody's more negative than Ernberg. There's something about Ernberg. Joseph, I think you and I would get along great. There's a fire. There's a hostility. There's a negativity. I don't know.
I'm sure would love us? The guy who hates us.
I love Ernberg though, because whenever I think I'm getting too negative, Ernberg jumps in there with a thought that is more negative than mine and a little bit more hostile, and I love it.
I can't believe he spells fuck with a Q. Go for it, Joseph.
I love it. That's awesome. Fuji Simeon says, besides the draft and trades, it'll be very lean for Bay Area sports until the NFL returns. The UFL allows Niner fans can watch to find a kicker. Yeah, hopefully Niners find a kicker after the draft and some workout somewhere. I'll
tell you,
it is interesting. What are your sports watching, Dave? Let's talk about that for just a second.
Well,
for me, I like the fact, to me, 2 weeks ago, the Warriors were unwatchable, and now I can't wait till the game starts. All because they made one trade for Jimmy Butler. They moved some guys around. They changed their outlook. They're just so much more fun to watch. So, and I always feel that way about baseball as well. Like when my team can't hit, and that's the Giants almost every year, it's unwatchable. But as soon as they make a trade for a hitter and they go on the road, sometimes I like to watch the Giants more on the road because the ball goes over the fence. They hit doubles, triples, homers. It's more fun to watch. It's a better show.
Are you
At
getting ready
home, they don't score.
Larry, are you getting ready for your Jung Hoo Crew t-shirt? Did you get that email? The Jung Hoo Crew?
No. What is it?
So who rhymes with crew? I don't know if you noticed that, but they're selling Jung Hoo Crew t-shirts along with some ticket package that they're trying to give away. I got an email and I just saw Jung Hoo Crew and I was like, oh, somebody in marketing.
Is there Luther? Is Luther Campbell going to be part of this?
I don't think so. Yeah, Uncle Luke.
Me so.
There we go.
Yes, there
Doodoo
you go.
Brown. Let's go. Let's
Luther
go.
Campbell. You know what? Jung Hoo Lee. Yeah, I'll say this about the Giants. I did a video yesterday on the Giants. Why? Because the Giants opened camp yesterday. The Giants still can't hit, and I don't understand why they can't hit. I don't understand why they don't try to get more offensive players, but they really can't hit. I do think, though, that they have enough young pitching that I think if you could get some of those young pitchers to, be in the rotation and move Hicks to the pen, and you have now Walker, Doval, Rogers, Hicks, and all the rest of the guys down there, I think their pitching could be okay. And I love, the fact that that Jung Hoo will be back healthy, because I think he's a really good defensive center fielder. And I love Matos coming off of being really good in the Venezuelan Winter League. To me, the wild card factor for the Giants is Marco Luciano. He's too explosive of a bat. He's too talented of a guy to just never figure it out. To me, it's like if that guy comes of age, then they could be something. If he doesn't come of age, probably not.
Give him 500, 600 at bats. Quit riding the fence. Quit balance beaming your players with, bad week, we're going to send him down. 3 good weeks in the minors, we're going to bring him back up.
He might be out of options.
Put him in the lineup, sink or swim.
Yeah, I totally agree. Get the same. The Giants last year bounced Elliot Ramos out of spring training in the middle of March. They only called him up, Damon, because they got into a pinch with injuries. He became an all-star. Yeah. He hit the only shot that's ever been hit by a right-handed hitter into the Cove. He became an all-star. He became the reason to watch. They almost didn't even have him on the roster. That's how precarious everything is. I totally agree with you. You're going nowhere. You're universally picked fourth. Give Marco Luciano 500 at-bats in the big leagues this year, and let's see if he can develop. Because if he does, you're going to potentially be a wild card team. And if he doesn't, then you can move off. But if you had other DH options, I'd be like, oh, well, you can't risk it. But you don't. You don't have other DH options. You're going with Wilmer Flores and Lamont Wade and just dudes, just guys. Guys that are not great players. So give those ABs. I know he's not a shortstop. He's not a third baseman. He's probably an outfielder. Maybe he's a DH. But Marco Luciano has got bat speed. He's got strong hands. He puts a charge in the ball that almost no other Giant does. And I realize he's got a lot of smoothing out of the rough spots and a lot of improvement to come. So what? Put him out there. Let him strike out 3 times and hit a bomb. See if you can get your coaches to bring him along. To me, I think Luciano.
Look at it this way. He's Willy Adames. He is. He's Willy Adames. He is going to strike out 300 times in 500 at-bats with 25 home runs. And that's the guy you just signed, Willy Adames. So,
yeah. Fuji Simeon says most sources are just the voices in people's heads.
Correct. Awesome. And 70% of all stats are made up 93% of the time.
It's like that the cologne from Anchorman. Oh, it's got real bits of panther in it, and it works every. Sorry, what was the line? Something like
the Sex Panther. It works 90% of the time, 80% of the time, or something like that.
Yeah, it was like 90% of the time it works every time. It was something like that. Fuji Simeon, sorry to mentioning baseball, but Farhan is now an advisor to LA. Covert op to sabotage San Francisco complete. Sorry to hear about it. Mike Woodson and IU.
Hey, it's time to move on from Mike Woodson. He big time Don Fisher last night, who's a epic broadcasters. Don Fisher is one of the most important Hoosiers of all time, and he's a broadcaster. He is the Vin Scully of Indiana athletics, Don Fisher. And Mike Woodson big timed him on his pregame show, wouldn't come out to do it. And it was.
And what happened? They fired him?
No, but
you want him fired.
He's going to be done at the end of the year. They've already announced it's his last year. He's not coming back. But the the whole point is, Woodson, if you're still around, you're literally the only good you are is to tell a Bob Knight story on the night where Tom Izzo's trying to pass Bob Knight for the most Big Ten wins ever, and he didn't. Go Hoosiers. We're not gonna let Tom Izzo pass Bobby on our watch. I can't believe they beat Michigan State last night. I really can't. Indiana's bad. They're not going to the tournament. It's time for Mike Woodson to go. He's a terrible coach. He has no feel for his own team. And but at least we didn't let Izzo pass Knight with a win over Indiana. So there you go. That's my NCAA tournament right there.
Are the Hoosiers going to make the NC2As?
No.
Wow. Jater Whedon says grumpy Garrett Wilson for Debo and a day 2 pick. Now, Damon, I've thrown this trade out. This is the trade I would make if I could make it. Is I would trade Debo and a second or a third to the Jets for Garrett Wilson. Why? Because I really just, Debo needs to go, but the Niners have to find another receiver, and they got to find a receiver who's not a rookie. They got to find a receiver that can run sub 4.4. They got to find a receiver that can run routes. They got to find a receiver that can complement their current receivers. And to me, Garrett Wilson is that guy, and I'd be willing to trade Debo and multiple picks to the Jets if I could get Garrett Wilson. It's probably a pipe dream, but I'm hearing rumors that he's going to be dealt.
The best thing you got going for you is the Jets are enough of a clown show to maybe do that. I don't know why the Jets would do that, but okay.
Well, the only reason the Jets would do it is just because he was drafted from the previous regime. Joe Douglas drafted him, and Joe Douglas is out. Saleh probably authorized it. Saleh's out. So who knows? Sometimes you see trades. I would imagine they're going to want to keep Garrett Wilson, but you never know. He's demanded a trade, I believe, and if they move him, man, that's the guy I would go after. I'd want him more than Devontae, more than Tyreek, because those guys cost a lot of money. This guy's on his rookie contract still, so he's still very, very reasonably cost. Mark's Main says, I know Krug isn't fond of big signings, but 49ers have to get a wide receiver 1. And what do you think of Aaron Rodgers for QB2 if the price is right?
No.
I just don't think there's any way in hell that Aaron Rodgers would ever be QB2. And here's the other thing, too, about that. You can't do that to Brock Purdy, man. No. You can't put a Hall of Fame quarterback behind him and say, we all saw what it was like when they had a quarterback who couldn't play dead. Competing with him and Trey Lance, you still had half the fan base who were like, go to Lance. I still, to this minute, will get people in the chat say they ought to go back to Lance. So, it's like you can't have Trey Lance. You can't have Aaron Rodgers. As far as backup, who's a backup?
Aaron Rodgers is in the bouquet of bad decisions. You get a dozen roses in your bouquet. Aaron Rodgers is in the dozen roses of bad New York Jets decisions. He was a disastrous signing. He set the entire franchise back years with his diversion. It was well intended, but it didn't work out for a millisecond. It is the wrong time to get into any business with Aaron Rodgers. Full pass.
And Mark's Main, I would say it's not that I'm not a fan of big signings. I just think that you have to do them you can't do them every year. You can't go all in on one player in a team sport every year because it's really about depth, and you got to have depth. You're going to have injuries, and the Niners, to me, are on that. They're in that, like, their D-line used to be incredibly deep. Their D-line right now is not deep at all. So I'm not anti-big signings. I'm just anti-giving up tons of picks. If you can do it cheaply, do it. But I'm a believer that you build in the draft, and I think the Eagles are proof that you got to build in the draft. As far as wide receiver 1, I do agree with you there, which makes this a very complicated offseason, right? Because you're trading Debo, he wants out. You have Ayuk, you're paying him like a number 1, but he's not going to be back probably till halfway through the year. You've drafted Ricky Pearsall in the first round, so that screams that you want him to be kind of a number 1. And I don't know that he's capable of that. So they're in a real pickle there. They've got to find a young, cheap, talented receiver that can make an impact. That is hard to do.
Hey,
that's their charge.
Jacob Cowing, for fuck's sakes. How about that? Do that.
Get Jacob Cowing in the weight room. That guy's too weak. Fuji Simeon. Haha, of course Larry as an SI Wildcat can pat his head and rub his stomach at the same time. Boy. LOL, joking Larry. I didn't you said I could do it? I was trying to do it, but I was patting my head and then patting my stomach instead of rubbing my stomach while I was patting my head. It's very difficult to do. Greg RJZ says, guys, watching the Niners 1989 playoff run, effing amazing. Joe Montana is incredible. 126-6. Wow, the Eagles blowout. Good 89 Niner team. Incredible 55-10. There's a lot of thoughts there. All in one.
Yeah, there's a lot of run on in there. I don't know.
I'm not sure exactly. I'm not getting the 126-26.
How about this? Joe Montana was good. We agree.
Joe is.
Hey, thank you, Larry. I've got Cyrus coming up at the top of the hour for our Warriors Weekly. Obviously, plenty to talk about with Jimmy Butler, who through 8 quarters has been a great ad for the Warriors. How long can it go? The least amount of buzz any All-Star Week has ever had attached to it is the one that is being attached to this one. Nobody in San Francisco is talking about the All-Star game. If you walked around San Francisco right now and said, where's the All-Star game this year? I guarantee you 99 out of 100 people would be like, I don't know.
Steph is not in the 3-point shooting contest?
It's like Barry Bonds not being in the home run derby when the All-Star game showed up to
why? What's the problem?
I don't understand it. It's the only miscalculation of Steph Curry's entire career. What led to this decision? I don't get it. Anyways, that's coming up with Cyrus today. I really got to pee badly. Okay. So let's just say,
let's call it right here. Damon's gonna hit the can. I've got to do some videos. May have to do some weightlifting. I got a busy day. Check me out tonight. Niners Nightly at 6. Brian Peacock's in the house from Locked On 49ers. He's gonna stop by. So check it out tonight on the Leader at 6. That's going to do it for us, Damon. I'll give you the final word.
I gotta pee!